many of us experienced who have travelled, that's for sure, by plane. So we've got a really interesting guest, a bit of an insight into travel and jet lag. And I know I've certainly experienced a lot of jet lag in my time, that's for sure. I've been on many, many long haul flights. But let's get some more information off Dr. Maja Schaedel, who's going to give us an insight into some research and maybe some tips even also, what we can do. I'm going to get my pen and paper handy as well, because I'm sure I'm going to need some of these tips myself moving forward. So, Dr. Maja Schaedel, welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to speak to you.
That's great to speak to you. So, give us a bit of an insight to the research, if you will, please.
Yeah, there's this interesting bit of research that Yotel have commissioned, which actually looks at just the impact that jet lag has on us all. So I was really surprised to find that 27% of Brits actually would call in sick to work if they had jet lag. So it obviously has this massive impact. And actually almost a third of people actually decide against going on long-haul flights if that means that they might have jet lag. So it really actually impacts on our travel decision-making. So I think that it's important to sort of really think about, if we are going to be going away, how do we prevent the massive impact of jet lag and how it really impacts on our lives, because it can be huge and there's all sorts of ways it affects people. And for some people, there are other ways, and some people are more affected than others. But actually, I think for some, it can be really disabling.
No, absolutely, completely agree. And I speak from experience there for sure. I think for me, I would say anecdotally, the longer haul flight, the more the time zone differentiates, the more it takes longer to adjust. So absolutely, I would agree. I would certainly factor that in, because obviously, for me personally, depending on the flight, but it can take, on a really, really long haul flight, even a good 3 or 4 days, if not even longer sometimes, to adjust. But what's your sort of take on it? I know sort of probably outside the scope of our conversation, Dr. Maja, but is there any sort of thing causal there, like a longer flight with the wider the time zone? Does that?
Absolutely. Yeah, the longer the flight, the worse it is. So actually, every day you have in your new time zone, your body catches up by an hour. So the further you go, the longer it takes for your body to catch up on. And this is because of something called the circadian rhythm, or otherwise known as your internal body clock. And this is controlled by a part of our brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And that's really in control of the production of melatonin, which is that kind of sleepy hormone that makes us think that it's time to sleep. And really, it's this mechanism, this circadian rhythm and our internal body clock, that actually helps us to know whether or not it's daytime or nighttime. So actually, this is really important. We do need to know, because otherwise we'd be sleeping in the day and we'd be awake during the night. And what tends to happen when we fly long haul is that our internal body clock gets really confused, and what we thought was nighttime then changes, and then our daytime changes. So we have to do everything we can to sort of speed up that process of transition. But it's not easy. Like it's something that we struggle with. We're not used to. We wouldn't have evolved as cave people to be able to travel so quickly across different time zones in that way. So it does kind of it takes us by surprise, shall we say?
Absolutely. What I find interesting speaking to you there, what I find really interesting is, like, say for example, if I was to sort of fly out to Australia, either way back to the UK, I still experience similar jet lag. But if I was to fly to the States, for example, the USA, if I arrive there, I generally feel okay. I don't feel a jet lag. But when I come back from USA, I don't know if it's to do with like the time zones. Literally, sort of go straight to bed within a few hours, and sort of I'm out for. Does that sort of can it be a factor?
That's exactly right, and that's what a lot of people find, and it's partly to do with which direction you're going in. So if you think about flying westward towards the US from the UK, you're generally flying in the same way as the time zones kind of travel. So you're kind of going through the day, if you like. Whereas if you're flying eastwards towards Asia or Australia, you're going against the time zone. So it's much more disruptive to people to fly eastward. And, it can the problem is, if you're going on holiday, whether or not you're going east or west, you have to go and come back. So you either have to kind of sacrifice, your jet lag, like the difficulties you get with jet lag on the going there, or you have to sort of face them when you come back. And so sometimes people say, I just want to enjoy my holiday, so actually I'd prefer not to have massive jet lag when I go, but actually I can face it when I come back. And sometimes people feel the opposite and feel like actually, maybe when you're on holiday you can just about cope with jet lag, but when you get back to the UK and back to work, then it's a bit more tricky.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, I guess sort of. I mean, the topic is around holidays, but I suppose if someone has a conference to speak or maybe a sporting event, then obviously people's holidays are important. They want to enjoy them, but if they've got like a conference to do in a day or so afterwards, or maybe like a sporting event, for example, these can be the fine margins, Dr. Mayer, between sort of winning and losing a sporting match, for example. If you are sort of jet lag that can affect performance in a big way, but I suppose it's another story for another day. But just in terms of like what any sort of tips that people can sort of take from this, and also what I was wondering as well, sort of what do you think is the distance, the sort of minimum distance for sort of jet lag? I mean, surely people can't get jet lag if they're flying for 2 hours to maybe I don't know, France.
Well,
yeah.
You'd be surprised. I think that even just seeing the impact of the clocks going forwards can have on people, even this weekend, it can have a real impact on people. Just 1 hour. People often feel that they can feel the effects. They feel groggy. They can feel kind of a bit drowsy, a bit lethargic. So we do know that even changing your time of sleep is by an hour can have an impact. But I would say that generally people tend to complain about jet lag a little bit more when it gets beyond kind of 6 to 8 hours. I think people often feel it a bit more when it gets a bit further like that. But there's loads of stuff you can do to help with that. There's stuff that you can do before you go away. So before you travel, it's quite useful to try and start to change your time of going to bed and waking up, even by kind of 15 minutes in the day before you go, or half an hour in the few days before you go, because it means that actually, you're just helping your body adjust a little bit more when you arrive. And then whilst you're on the plane, I think often people can kind of have a glass of wine and watch a film and relax. But generally speaking, if you can nap in your first part of the flight, that can be better than in the latter half, because you're really trying to adopt the new time zone as quickly as you can. So if you can get your nap in right at the beginning and then wake up and sort of start to feel a bit more fresh in what would be the morning in your new time zone, for example, that would be better generally. Also, alcohol and caffeine, they can play havoc with our circadian rhythm. So generally speaking, I recommend people not drinking alcohol and keeping your caffeine to a minimum when you're on a flight. And then when you get off the flight in your new time zone, it's really best to try and have exposure to daylight as much as possible, because daylight is one of the best ways of regulating our circadian rhythms and helping us to understand what is daytime and what is nighttime. So generally speaking, I'd say take the sunglasses off, get out and about, and really allow your eyes and your brain to process that daylight and to understand that it's daytime. And then if you are going to have a nap, you can try and have a nap early on after you get off the plane, but often, if it's not too long a flight and the time difference isn't too great, sometimes it can be worthwhile just trying to push through and then get an earlier night the following night. And that way you can kind of be sort of jumping into the new time zone a bit more effectively, and it takes a bit less time to adjust to it. But I would just say, kind of expect that there's going to be a bit of disruption, but don't let it impact on your holiday. I mean, this research shows that over a quarter of people actually feel like jet lag ruins their holidays, which is such a shame. So I think that, in a way, it's probably helpful to really try to get out and be active as much as possible, because that will, again, really help your circadian rhythm adjust.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I sort of, from my experience, a lot of the things you've mentioned there, I aim to do. I mean, as much as I try the coffee one, the caffeine one, that's something I still need to work on. I suppose one sort of final sort of question. It may not be in the sort of research, and I don't want to sort of like have everyone trying to book at a certain time, but does it make a difference when you fly? Sort of all that sort of considered. I mean, I suppose there's so many different variables and different distances, obviously, different places. But let's say, for example, if someone's flying, say, like a 3 or 4 hour flight, would it make a difference when they sort of fly, if they flew in the morning or the evening, in terms of how they felt, or would it just pretty much be the same?
Well, with the shorter flights, it doesn't make so much of a difference, but with the longer flights, it really does. So I think that often the flights back from the US can often be overnight, and that works really well, I think, generally, because it kind of means that you can kind of get your sleep in early on and then sort of wake up and hopefully, adjust to that daytime as soon as you land. And on the way back, I think going eastwards, they can be daytime flights. And again, because you're flying with the time zone, it's not quite so disruptive. I think that generally speaking, what time of day you go, it sort of impacts on if you're able to fall asleep on a flight. So sometimes people say that they find it really hard to sleep on a flight, but other people say actually that's okay, I can do that. And I think that if you can sleep on a flight, then that could really work for you if you could go during the night and get your sleep in. If you're somebody that struggles to do that, then it can be a bit more difficult. But then there are also things like sleep masks and ear plugs that you can use as well to try and help your body know what is nighttime, what is the sort of darkness that associated with nighttime, and that should help to, again, just to give your brain the signals that it needs to understand what is daytime and what is nighttime.
Yeah, and absolutely, and I suppose sort of one final thing, Dr. May, when I sort of walked past the first class in the plane, I think, wouldn't that be amazing to be able to fly? It's well, my approach strange, and I'm sure a lot of people too. But I mean, if you could, I mean, that's the thing about in a flight. It's not always easy to sort of like to get comfortable and sort of be able to get that sort of sleep. I mean, some people can sleep anywhere, I guess, but for those people who sort of struggle, you're
absolutely right. I think it can be quite hard to sleep on a plane, especially if you're flying in an economy seat and you're bolt upright and there's lots of noise. I think that the key with sleep on planes is often to not get too focused on needing to sleep. I think as soon as we start to put pressure on needing to sleep or wanting to fall asleep, it kind of drifts away. And so I think just generally to be a bit more relaxed about whether or not you sleep on the plane or not is probably more helpful, just to generally relax and hopefully get some sleep, but not to kind of get too hung up about it.
Absolutely. Do you know what I find sort of like psychological as well is those sort of, now you get those sort of watches that have the sleep. I mean, I've got one that tells you, I don't know how accurate it is or reliable it is, but gives you an idea of how much you've slept. Sometimes it's a psychological thing. If I look at that and it says the sleep quality was good, then even I feel better. And I mean it's not sort of completely outside. We're short of time. Have you ever come across those things, Dr. Mayer, the sort of sleep that these days you've got on the watch?
Yeah, the sleep trackers. So I know that some people find them really helpful, but I would say, generally speaking, I usually advise people to take them off when they're struggling with their sleep, just for the reason you've just mentioned, actually, which is that, great if you can look down and see that you've slept well, but a lot of the time people look down and see, I didn't get enough deep sleep, or I need to get more sleep, and that can make people feel more concerned about their sleep. And as soon as we start to feel concerned about our sleep, it's like we can wave goodbye to sleep completely.
Absolutely.
So I generally think that they're not so helpful for people with insomnia and other sleep difficulties like that.
No, definitely. And just where people can find the research, Dr. May, is anywhere they can have a look to sort of find? I wouldn't mind checking out the research myself in more detail.
Absolutely. Yotel.com, where you can have a look at the research and get some tips and ideas on jet lag and how to manage it.
Brilliant. I'm sure it'll come in sort of handy for a lot of our listeners, myself as well. Thanks for your time, Dr. Maja Schaedel. It's been great speaking to you, really fascinating and informative, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.